Yeah, cool. We're recording. So, hello everyone. Should be going live. Should be all working. And I've got with me here Dr. Mike Joy, who I'll get to introduce himself shortly. But just a couple of quick housekeeping things. We've got the Q&A feature down the bottom of your screen, and the whole sort of purpose for these talks that we're doing is so that you can engage with them. We will be, I've just reminded myself to live stream this on Facebook as well, but please feel free to get in and ask myself, or especially Mike. I'm sure you're dying to ask Mike some questions about yeah, anything sort of relating to his specialties or others. But yeah, please feel free to engage through that feature down the bottom there, the Q&A. Yeah, and so we're recording this live as well, so we will put this out on our channels after the talk. And yeah, like I say, it's going through Facebook Live. Once I just finish talking, I'll do that, trying to do two things at once here. But yeah, just to introduce myself, I'm Nick Morrison. I'm founder of Go Well Consulting, a sustainability consultancy. And yeah, we're really driven to help guide business to the what we call circular, regenerative and inclusive economy. And we'll talk about that in more detail with Mike. But one of our key sort of I guess goals and passions is around communicating sustainability, communicating circularity, communicating science, communicating all these, I guess, ideas and principles so that, yeah, small to medium businesses in New Zealand and the general public can understand it and get on board, because we all need to make changes. Governments need to make change, business need to make change, and customers and the general public need to make changes to what we're doing. And so this talk tonight, we had a talk a couple of weeks ago with Diana Finch, who is the Managing Director of Bristol Pound, a local currency, and we talked all about local currencies. And then tonight with Mike, we want to really talk about yeah, communicating science and communicating yeah, sustainability and these ideas and getting that across. And I've already had a couple of chats with Mike already before coming live, and I'm sure we'll go on all sorts of tangents, but that's the general kind of aim for tonight. So yeah, without further ado, Mike, do you want to maybe just give us a quick introduction of yourself, and maybe you just want to tell us a little bit what you've been doing during the lockdown and COVID and how that sort of impacted you?
Sure. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm a freshwater ecologist is my profession, I guess. I was a lecturer at Massey for 20 years. I started late, and you know, I didn't go to university until I was 33 years old. I'd been, oh, you name it. Really easier to make a list of the jobs that I hadn't done rather than the jobs I had done, but they included driving trucks and buses and sailing the Pacific and building and installing air conditioning, and they're just the things that come to mind. A heap of different jobs, the way that you could in those days. And when you got sick of a job at lunchtime, you just went next door and got another job. But my role at the moment is senior researcher at the Institute for Governance and Policy Studies at Victoria University, and this kind of thing is really my job. But I guess the distinction, I've gone from being a freshwater ecologist and doing a master's and PhD and seeing how much our freshwaters were declining, and I became an activist, not through choice but through anger at seeing what had happened and what was happening to our freshwaters for a start. Unfortunately, or whatever, I'd grown up believing this story that I was so lucky to be born in clean green New Zealand, and you know how fantastic that was, what a privilege it was, and then to see it being destroyed before my eyes turned me into a radical, some would say. But I don't think what I'm talking about is radical at all. I think that the way we live and the way we have lived up to a few weeks ago is completely radical. We're destroying everything, and so yeah, it's a term, radical, but I don't actually believe I am. I think I'm very conservative. So, but I guess that what's happened is that I've never been able to just stick to not, you know, I have to see the bigger picture. I always see the bigger picture. So I saw polluted rivers, and then I had to find out why were our rivers being polluted, and then each step it gets bigger and bigger. So what I would call myself is a systems ecologist now, because and there's a bunch of us, and I think it's quite a an elitist kind of thing to call yourself a systems ecologist, but people who understand the linkages. And it struck me writing a little article yesterday or the day before, well, I guess it's been in the back of my mind, that as an ecologist, that what I understand and what I know from ecology overlaps so much with an Indigenous worldview, especially a Māori worldview. And then I'm thinking that the Māori worldview is a systems view. We've just put this Western science word on it, but it's this understanding how everything is interlinked, and you're never going to fix anything just looking at one component and then saying, oh, we're going to fix, I don't know, we're going to fix methane in cows by giving them some GE grass and make it go away. But that's just one factor of the impact of intensive farming, you know. So you fix one thing, and that's nothing. Whereas reducing intensity fixes a whole raft of environmental issues, and they're all connected. And so that's kind of that's what makes me different, I think.
Yeah, right. A few things I want to unpick there, but just before we go on, I just wanted to just understand for you the impacts of COVID and how has that sort of impacted you over the past couple of weeks, other than having to sort of base yourself from home a bit more, I imagine.
Yeah, I was working from home a lot, but yeah, it's obviously not being able to go anywhere. So as far as work goes, it's just been pretty much the same, carrying on. But
do you lecture at Vic?
Yeah, well, not officially a lecture, but I end up doing lots of guest lectures. So I gave a lecture, a 2-hour lecture today, a 2-hour session today. But it's on a bunch of other papers, other courses and that kind of thing. Yeah. Still doing guest lectures at Massey even, so cool. It's still doing that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I wanted to now just some of the stuff you said there, lots I wanted to pick up. I wanted to go back to, and I kind of knew this before meeting you, but I knew that you sort of came into this late, I guess, and you came into study a bit late. And just to sort of comparison, I was a fitness trainer before getting into sustainability. I studied sports science at at university and was a fitness trainer and Pilates trainer and personal trainer for 10 odd years, and was lucky enough to travel through Central South America, Southeast Asia, and then spend 4.5 years in London. So I got to see, and while I was there, tripped around Western Europe especially. So I got to see a lot of the just horrific wealth disparity around the world, and a lot of the horrific environmental pollution that is happening, especially what really hit me, I guess it's for a lot of people because it's so visual, but was plastics. And I vividly remember being in the San Blas Islands, which is a little archipelago between Colombia and Panama, and stopping at this beautiful island, like, postcard sort of island, golden sand, palm trees, coconuts, crystal clear water, and loving it. And then walked up and over the small island on the other side. It was just strewn with plastic. And it was just like such an impactful kind of moment. And just sort of feeling that when I came back to New Zealand, I was like, I don't feel that helping sort of rich housewives get a little bit tighter in their stomachs or whatever was really helping the world that much, and was really kind of using my skills or following my passion so much. So I changed course and was lucky enough to get a job through a friend I was working at a compostable packaging company called Packaging, and that was, I was like, oh my God, compostable plastics, that's the we'll talk about this, Mike, the silver bullet. I was like, that's the solution. Oh my God. And I dived into that, and that was kind of my door into sustainability, into circularity, into product stewardship and composting, and it was very much starting again, and I had to learn a whole lot about it. I'd come from being the go-to guy around fitness and health, and I was managing the studio in London. People came to me with their problems, and whereas I had to drop down and be a learner again and take all that's on, and just as the more and more I learnt, the more I sort of became aware, I guess. And for me, the path was learning about New Zealand's just shameful waste statistics, the amount of waste that goes into our landfills and the amount of waste that goes into our rivers and into the ocean, etc., was really mind-blowing. And it was exactly the same, sort of was had grown up thinking so lucky, this beautiful clean New Zealand, and when you travel, everyone goes, oh, you're from New Zealand, it's so beautiful, you're so lucky, it's so beautiful. And so anyway, I came back and had that kind of experience. So I just sort of wanted to hear from you what it was like starting late into this game, and sort of yeah, what that experience has been like for you, as opposed to, I guess, a lot of your colleagues who, came straight out of school into uni and into their careers from there.
Yeah, I think there's parallels. Hearing your story with mine is that if you've had that whole other life and some other job and traveling the world and that kind of, you see the world differently than people who've just come straight through the school system into the university system and then get a job there and become full-time academics. And I think that it does make us see the world differently. But yeah, it was for me at 33 going to university, and I hadn't, I'd got actually suspended quite a few times at school and never really finished. I was in trouble. I was always, it wasn't real serious stuff. It was stupid things with cars and girls and that kind of, that I got into trouble. I was in no way, an environmentalist or anything like that in those days, but then a gradual awareness like you, and then going to university, it was a struggle for the first year, because I didn't study statistics or anything like that, didn't even know what it was, and so it was a struggle the first year, and then I really started to enjoy it. I got to do the master's. It was a master's project that was funded through DOC to look at the impact of dams on native fish, and jumped into that and did really well, published 4 papers out of my master's, and then that led to a really well-funded PhD, where I got to spend 3 years in the best parts of New Zealand and the best rivers sampling native fish, and it was just the best time of my life, that PhD. I mean, I know people struggle with theirs, but I joke about it that because I went straight from there into a lectureship at Massey. I got, before I'd even finished writing up my thesis, and I went from, and this is the classic story, I went from doing one thing really well, which was that PhD, to then doing 50 or 100 things really badly, which has been what I've been like ever since. Because doing so many things at once for me was teaching, and you're expected to do research, and you're expected to supervise students, and I had a heap of postgrad students that I was supervising as well, and so you're just trying to spread yourself too thin, but it's a lot of fun as well, with stuff that I was interested in. So it was good.
Hey, listening to you speak up, I want to ask, how was it for you coming into it late, but also as your awareness grew, and as you have gone from, I guess, not knowing and not having any expertise around freshwater, let's say, for that topic specifically, but also your wider awareness of the issues and environmental and social and the sort of systemic problems. But as you grew aware and started talking out about it more and became more to this sort of level of activist, how's that been for you with your relationships and your personal life with friends and family and whatnot? I'm keen to hear, just from my own perspective. Have you found that challenging? Have you had the piss taken out of you by friends or family, or oh, bloody greenie, or that kind of stuff? Or have they come along with you? Has it created tension or not?
No, there's definitely been tensions. I've got offside with the dairy industry in a major way. I've been attacked. There was the famous, I don't know if you've seen it, the Stephen Sackur interview on BBC TV, where, that was hilarious. So
I'll look it up.
John Key was being interviewed by Stephen Sackur. Do you remember that one? And John Key says, "Oh yeah, well, I don't agree with him, and he's just a scientists are just like lawyers. You can just go get another opinion, And he's never come back with, he never did come back with the other opinion. But I mean, so that kind of stuff, when it's horrible, because you feel that you're doing this because you actually genuinely care, and it's kind of heartbreaking to be labelled like I was, as a traitor or a treasonous or something like that. Highlighting these impacts when I'd given up trying to get any reaction within New Zealand. Then I start, talking about it on an international stage, or I basically got dragged into talking about it on an international stage, and then being accused of treason, as if if we keep the secret long enough about the fake clean green New Zealand, that will be okay, So it is really hard when that happens to you. And then as far as the personal stuff goes, I've stopped. I used to try, and I've turned into an old curmudgeon now, and I won't pull punches. I will not stand by why I won't. I used to, listen to racism and all kinds of bad stuff and just play along, but no longer. I'll call people out
Life's too
straight
short, right?
away. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're making me think like my friends will often mock me a bit, if I turn up to their house and it was quite my, I guess, gateway drug was, like I say, plastics and plastic
Mm,
bags.
mm.
And so I might turn up to a friend's house and they'll, quickly get rid of all the plastic, or don't
Yeah,
tell,
yeah,
don't tell Nick, da, 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 da.
yeah.
And you get it. And this, but you're kind of just like, you'd also like to just be able to forget about it and just be able
Yeah.
to have your, normal kind of conversations and stuff. And
Yeah.
I definitely, I'm nowhere near on your kind of level of, I guess, outspokenness. I haven't got that brave yet, or angry or whatever it is, Mike, but I
Mm,
haven't got to that level yet. And so B, I haven't had anywhere near the kind of, if I haven't had any really of kind of vitriol or anger back towards me or labeling, but you do, just even amongst friends and some family members and extended family members and stuff, kind of the greenie, the greenie,
mm.
or the hippie, or whatever that
Yeah,
means.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just, for me, it kind of highlights this really interesting thing where we love to label people, right? We love to label things. It makes it easy. And what's really challenging, and I'd like to kind of link this in a little bit to kind of the social media platforms, is people just sort of drop on this label, you're a greenie, and it goes the other way. You're a farmer. You're
Mm,
right wing, left wing, da da da. And people just love labeling, and that just kind of puts you in a box, and it's easy to handle you and deal with you, And I find that
mm,
so frustrating, but equally I kind of get it. Like it is hard to kind of not label people and describe people, or they're in a much more detailed way. And on social media, right, it's so much easier just go, bloody greenies, boom, boom, and rather than, the people who are trying to speak out to us about how water work, water systems work, and the cycle of
yeah,
carbon,
yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, I don't know, as a point, and I just wondered if you had any kind of comment on that around the labeling and the labels you've been given.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's a classic ploy by the industry to shoot me down. So once the farming, dairy, industrial agriculture, industrial fertilizer companies all started to realize that I was kind of a threat, then they started attacking me, and their attack, modus operandi is to make out he's crazy, he's a bloody greenie, he's a commie, he's a whatever, because then people, that's the end of it. Then they don't listen. Then they don't have to engage anymore, because you're just a something or other, and then that's the end of it. Then you can go move on to something else then.
Yeah.
So it's a ploy, and it works. There's no doubt that it does work, and I really try to avoid that myself. And what you were saying about going around to people's places or something, and often people kind of feel like they have to tell me about some green stuff they've done, and I really don't want to tell people how to live their lives at all. I don't care what they do. I'm not trying to judge people, but as long as they're aware, it's the awareness thing that I'm more kind of concerned that they can do what you want. But as long as as long as you don't think that by buying that electric vehicle you're saving the world, then fine. Good on you for buying an electric car, but just don't start telling the rest of the world that you've solved the problem by buying that car, and then you can just carry on living your life and not worry anymore. That's the thing. Yeah.
Blind her away every
Mm.
month. Hey, well, that's a good segue, Mike. You've probably
Mm.
done tactically there, but I know you want to talk a bit about energy, and so maybe now's a good time to sort of to dive into that, coming from the electric car angle.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just one of the examples, because it kind of frustrates me that people latch. I mean, because I get that as well. See, the other thing is because again, talking about social media, I've got this Facebook page, Dr. Mike Joy, and I get into, arguments because, and often I don't know if you've found this as well, but there'll be a silver bullet. Someone's got, classic is hemp.
Yeah.
All we need to do, we can solve all the problems. We just grow hemp, or we just all get electric cars, and the whole thing's problem solved, because they haven't sort of, either they're in the business and they're making money out of it, or they haven't joined the dots. They haven't looked at the bigger picture, and so yeah, touching on that movie that you talked about. So then, Gibbs and Moore make this movie showing that,
Human Planet. Yeah.
yeah, no, the what
Planet
is
of
it?
Humans.
Planet of Humans.
Planet of Humans. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it
just
was
was released.
Planet of the Apes, Planet of the Humans.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
That's
that one, that
it.
points out that the reality of renewable energy. So I know there's a lot of, why I wanted to just sort of clear up a few points is I don't know how many people get this, but they tell me, oh, but we're 80% renewable energy in New Zealand. We're good.
Mm.
No, we're 80% renewable electricity in New Zealand. And
Mm.
electricity is about 20% of our overall, of our total energy use globally, and pretty similar in New Zealand if you take into account the embodied energy and stuff we import.
Mm.
So actually it's about what, 16, 17% of our energy use is renewable, if you're lucky, kind of thing. And the rest of it, and the other important thing is we don't, people see all these wind farms and they read all about solar panels and green hydrogen and all this magic stuff. Or today we have less renewable energy than we had yesterday or the day before or 100 years ago. We're not, as a proportion, we're not increasing renewable energy in our mix because, well, for one really good reason is that all of that renewable energy needs fossil fuel energy to build, just distribute, to put in the ground, to do all that. That's one good reason. But just because everything we do requires more energy. And so my favorite is Givon's paradox. So people say, well, but we've got their cars are much more efficient. Yeah, they are individually, but we've got so many more of them now that overall the net effect is that we're using more energy than we ever have before. And as a proportion, renewable is less and less every day. So we're not getting there. We haven't turned the corner. We haven't even started that. So it's really important that people understand that. And part of understanding that is and this, I encourage people to go on YouTube and have a look at this. Look up cyclist and toaster or something like that. There's this great YouTube clip of this huge, muscly track cyclist, and he gets on this special, one of those fixed cycle things, and it's connected up through a generator to a toaster, just a really little home toaster, even a tinier version than you can probably buy in the shop. Puts his one slice of toast in there, jumps on the bike, and he almost kills himself, and he barely toasts this piece of toast. So it's that kind of getting it that then if you turn it into human equivalents, then people start to get it. Okay, so in a tank of gas is equivalent energy to 4 years work for a human.
Yeah, right.
You pay $80 and you think, oh, what a ripoff, but you've just bought yourself a human slave for 4 years for that $80, and so we think that we're hard done by, but we're just getting, and so then you just convert that to all of our energy use, and it turns out that the average New Zealander has 200 or 300 slaves. That equivalent to that many human slaves, and you don't have to feed them or house them or anything like that. They just work for us for next to nothing, And so that kind of understanding is really, really important, just how privileged we are and how we're not going to have that in the future. If we want to be, carbon zero by 2050, then we got to give up a lot of slaves.
Yeah. I want to touch a few things there. Definitely the privilege thing. I think people totally underappreciate how privileged we are. Here we are sitting in a fully lit, warm, cozy place, and internet screens, like huge population of the world is still doesn't have electricity, still doesn't know where the meal's going to come from. The things that we complain about, having to walk, rather than drive, I sometimes feel like shaking people a bit, but I don't know if that comes, maybe there's that worldly thing, you have to go and see.
That's right.
The world maybe before you sort of understand that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You don't have to go too far in New Zealand to see that.
This is true.
Well, but most people can ignore that. I think maybe that was part of the really interesting part of my previous life. One of my early jobs, I milked cows for a year. I was a dairy farmer for a year, and then when I was in my early 20s, I drove taxis. I was building this old boat. Rebuilding an old yacht, and I needed the money, and it was good money in taxi driving in those days. But in those days, cars were really expensive, and most poor people didn't have cars. So I got to see a whole, I mean, it was in Lower Hutt and I was driving taxis in Petone and Nainai and places like that.
Mm.
There were all these factories in those days, Feltex and Levers and Dulux paints and that, and a whole part of society that I'd never normally would mix in, that I got to spend my whole life in, and really make some good friends and really see a whole part of New Zealand that I'd never knew
Yeah.
existed before. And that was such an important part of education for me as well.
Yeah, you're making me think of sort of this point. I'm trying really hard to get out of my bubble. Like, I live
Yeah,
here in Grey Lynn, and a very privileged part of the world, and got a great group of friends and whatnot, and work. I'm always sort of talking sustainability with lots of great businesses trying to do great things, but try really hard to get out of that bubble and go to parts of Auckland and parts of New Zealand where people don't talk about those things. People don't have the luxury of thinking about those things.
exactly. Yeah.
I think that's such a key to us shifting to a much more just and fair future, is that people get out of their bubbles. They resist this urge to put up walls and to watch flat screen TVs and watch news that's fed to them, rather than going out and experiencing it. And just to highlight that point, I was lucky enough to go over to Brazil for the Football World Cup in 2014. I'm a big soccer football fan. And I remember reading in the New Zealand papers before I went, it's going to be dangerous. The favelas are going to erupt, and they're going to target the tourists, and it's all the drugs, and it's dangerous, right? And I went there. It was just the most incredibly welcoming, friendly, hospitable place. I totally get that it would have been put on for the World Cup, and there would have been special security for sure. But I was out in Rio de Janeiro at night, drinking and partying with locals on the streets, and just had the most incredible time. It was just that thing of sort of going and actually experiencing it for yourself and making up your own views and your own news, I guess, rather than just watching what's fed through the news channels, because it doesn't make news, man helps old lady across the road. It does make news, man steals old lady's handbag.
Yeah, no, I mean, similar. I spent two sabbaticals, a few months in Eastern Europe, first in Romania and Bulgaria, and then most recently in Croatia, and I sort of realizing how exactly how privileged we are, and the things that we take for granted that other people have they don't have the privilege to talk about and think about things like we do. It's just living as a battle in itself, So totally. And like you, I found that I learned to ask when people say don't go there, they're the best places to go, because that's where it'll be. That's where you'll really see the things that will challenge you and make you think. And the best people as well, normally.
I'd exactly experience in Cambodia, and can't remember the Bronx or whatever, or the called it, and don't go there, dangerous sort of place. And I went there, and I just had a hell of a time. I will tell you though, just reminding myself of another quite impactful experience there. I was there and on the sort of floating pontoon. It was part of this backpackers, and looking out, and there were these big pipes sort of dredging and draining this lake, and for building more hotels, and you could see a couple were already built, and they were draining to create more land. And this, to the other side, to my right, you could see this guy with his young child in this canoe, and they had their holding net, out sort of fishing and pulling in these tiny little fish, and just watching and just seeing right there the impacts of neoliberalism and globalization on local people, and it was so powerful. It's something I've never forgotten. I've had a question come in here from Katie, that I'll just read it out to you.
Sure.
For your thoughts. So she says, Johan Rockstrom once said that whatever they tried in Sweden, they could only influence 15% of the population to consume organic foods. There was no real breakthrough until there were laws and taxes in place. Is there a possibility here in New Zealand for improvement without systemic change? What's your view?
Oh, it's such a hard one. I think that, and this is kind of the thinking behind the Better Futures Foundation. Is my experience, and I'm probably jumping ahead on what you want to ask about, but this is
No, that's fine.
But my experience is that if we wait for government to do something, it's never going to happen. That we have to drive the change. We have to give the government the mandate. And my experience most recently of that is, all of the pressure that I've been putting on, and not just me, with heaps of other people. It felt like it was just me for a while, but then there was lots of people talking about fresh water, and it became an election issue. And a lot of pundits say that last election was won and lost over fresh water and environmental stuff. It topped fresh water topped the list of the most important environmental issue for New Zealanders in a couple of polls.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the government wants to do something about fresh water because we gave them the mandate to do it. And, I've been on a couple of panels with Chloe Schwarbrick, and she can, that's exactly what she says. We can't do it by ourselves, especially the Green Party can't do it. It has to come from the people. So I think I've long since given up on writing submissions and going the process of trying to change stuff within government. It just does not do anything. They set the rules. I've been involved so many times where they'll set up this working group or a panel, and they know what the answer is. Working group without knowing what the answer they're going to get is, and so that's exactly what they do. And so that's where the only way we change it is.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Because I totally struck a chord with you there, because, like I said right at the start, I believe anyway, we all have to change. Governments have to make changes, public and business. And governments, as you sort of say, only change when they kind of get the mandate, right? They're going to pick the time when they're going to get enough public support that they're not going to get voted out. And so we need to build up that mandate and that public support. To me, that's when business have got a really key role to play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But to answer the question, so it would need the government to do it, but you've got to make the government do it, and then they will set the rules to make the rest of it happen. I totally agree with Johan of what he says, but it's got to come from the people, then to the government, and then the change happens, or from business as well. I know that the changes that are happening, you can see, I'm sure you've noticed with this regenerative farming, I've been kind of on the edges of that for years now, and it's having this real upsurge. And to me, that's the change coming from within, from the grassroots. It's a whole bunch of farmers that have had a guts full of this stupid system that they're caught up in, where they're suicidal, they've got massive debt, they do unhealthy things, they know it's unhealthy for them and the environment, and you get this change driven from within. And then the government will oh yeah, that's a great idea. Actually that was our idea, and now they'll bring in some rules to make it happen. But it never comes from the top down. Until
they get the mandate, right? So it's funny, you talk to some businesses and some business people, and they're kind of like, oh well, the government needs to set the laws and make it kind of even for everyone. And I get that, but it's this kind of like he said, she said, backwards and forwards. Whereas I guess, and really privileged in the kind of clients we work with are much braver people. Businesses are people, and business leaders are people who are making decisions. And it's fantastic. I think I'm trying to just sort of make a point here and get a message out there to those in businesses to be brave and to keep pushing the envelope, I guess, because you can do it so much quicker, and you don't have to worry about getting voted in or out. You have to worry about your customers for sure, but you don't have to worry about voting in and out like a government does. And you can have such more influence and sway over, I think, the public or the culture or the public perception of issues. I kind of look at the plastic bag example, because that was one that sort of like I was close to my heart and I was involved in quite a bit. Again, it was kind of really driven by driven by the people, and a lot of people speaking out about plastics and plastic bags. And then the two supermarkets just had a bit of a PR war. They made the change, and then so the government just came in and went, oh, yep, we've got the mandate.
That's right. They never did it, off the bat. They were always too gutless to do that. But when they can see it happening, then they'll go, oh, this is going to win me some points, and we'll get in on it. Yeah.
Hey, we've got a question here from Natalia Rangi Wananga. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. It's my best effort. Kia ora, Mike. What are your views around decolonising government policies and curriculum at tertiary institutes for better water management?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a huge issue. I mean, I'm just only beginning to get my head around this whole colonization
Yeah.
issue, and yeah, I mean, oh God, through universities, I'm kind of disappointed. I went to university thinking that these are the places that lead the world, and then I kind of ended up in an agricultural university where they're not leading anything; they're just following, and they get a lot of funding from industry and that kind of thing, and they're not leading the way. They're they're not doing that, and it's kind of a process of colonization as well. And I guess that what made it really come home to me was, and maybe it's not addressing the question, but the idea of colonization, how it's so pervasive,
Mm.
is Canterbury water management kind of issues that I've been involved in. And you've got this issue where Ngāi Tahu are doing some really harmful things and chopping down forests and putting in dairy farms and wiping out habitat and all that kind of thing. And then understanding that this Ngāi Tahu is a corporate. The Ngāi Tahu corporate isn't Ngāi Tahu Runanga, isn't the people, it's the corporate. And then I think, so why did they do that? And well, under the Treaty Settlement Act, the government, the Crown, tells Māori that they have to set up these corporate bodies to handle the money. So, you know, it's like this, you create this colonial kind of process that means that you know, do you get what I mean? It's kind of like
Yeah.
it's not how the money could have been spent and should have been spent. You've created this kind of mini version of the Crown within Māoridom,
Yeah.
and then it creates all these fights within it and
Yeah.
does all this bad stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'm not answering the question completely because it's something I'm on the edge of, but I'm very
Yeah.
aware of.
I'm just trying to remember, I'm just quickly looking up to try and remember the name of the organisation. If someone does know it, feel free to put it in the chat box there. But it was one of the sort of smaller media outlets did a series on decolonisation in Aotearoa, and it was really powerful. Really, I don't know, I learned a lot from it, and it really challenged a lot of my beliefs and a lot of my thinking, and um, which is really good, you know, because I think under the heart, a lot of this, Mike, and going right back to sort of some of the things we were talking about at the start, you know, I had to change a lot of my worldviews, and I was challenged a lot from traveling and from going into the space. And I grew up in Timaru. I'm from South Island, in a very rugby orientated, you know, and I played football and soccer, and a very farming rural background, ate a lot of meat, all that kind of stuff, drank a lot of beer, and coming out and starting to learn about that and facing up to the impacts of that was quite challenging, you know. It took me a while just to sort of, I guess, digest that shit. I am part of that problem. And I'm contributing to it, and it was the same. I learned about, again, plastics, and then it was also, it's the same kind of thing experience I had watching this show on decolonisation, and it's like, shit, you know, like I've been mindlessly sort of contributing to that, and it is quite impactful. It does take you some time to take it on board and process it, and then kind of deal with it. And, you know, and I'm talking over, you know, days and weeks or months here before you think, okay, right, I'm actually going to stop that behavior, so stop doing that. And yeah, that was exactly what sort of happened again with this decolonisation thing. But I think it's so much power in it. And going back to what you said right at the start around the Māori worldview, like it just makes so much more sense, right? I went to a workshop or a conferencey thing last year down in Rotorua, and it was organised by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who I'm sure you're probably aware of.
No, I know that. Yeah,
They
yeah.
really drive the circular economy stuff around the world, for those who don't know them, and they set it up with the Ministry for the Environment, and it was about Indigenous knowledge and how that would help sort of the circular economy. And I'm annoyed that I can't remember the woman's name, but this Māori woman, sort of Māori leader, got up and sort of said, we've basically been telling, you know, you Europeans and you colonists for centuries, really, and now you're finally catching up and listening, you know, and like the whole way that they plan and the whole way they live their lives is around the health of the real world and how it function and how it works.
I know. Well, I had exactly the same experience because I was part of that. I went to Gisborne and spoke on the marae there. It was a circular economy conference.
Yeah.
And there I am with a bunch of Pākehā scientists and academics talking about the circular economy. And I just said, like, it's like, standing up here trying to teach my grandmother how to suck eggs, this is the Māori world view, and we've just given it this label, but they totally got it, that was, it was there, and it will make these communities so much more resilient with what we've got coming as well.
Yeah. And it is, although there's like those challenges of sort of, I guess, facing up to it and understanding it and applying it, but and also, like, how lucky are we to live in New Zealand, to have that culture here, and have it to lean on, and have it to learn from, have it to influence us. I think that's where, we strongly believe we should be really leading the world in this kind of positive change, and I just think we're so fortunate to have that kind of knowledge around. Cool. Anyway, so I got another question here from Anonymous. What led you down the path of freshwater ecology? How can we possibly choose what to focus on when there's so much cool stuff out there to champion and protect? Your story is really heartening for me, changing career track in my 30s too.
Yeah, God, do it. My last PhD student, she did a master's with me in her 70s. She would just turn 70, I think. And she did a PhD with me, and she wouldn't tell me what her age was. I guess I could figure out, but it was the late 70s when she finished her PhD with me. So, and she loved it, and I loved working with her. So you're never too late. But as far as choices, I don't know that it matters that much. I mean, I'd kind of been vaguely interested in freshwater, and what happened to me was I went to university and I was inspired by a couple of lecturers, and that's what drove me down the freshwater environmental way. Dr. Death, who's famously, he and I have written a number of papers together, and they get referred to as Joy and Death, or Death and Joy, which is a great pair of authors for papers, and a guy called Peter Van Essen, who, so that's what, and so I think you just go in there with an open mind, and you will find the people who inspire you, and then just go with it. Don't make up I don't think it's a good idea to make up your mind before you go in there. Do something general, pick papers from all over the place, and you'll find your passion from that. That's my best advice.
Have you ever heard that song called Sunscreen by, I think it's Baz Luhrmann? It's a great, it was a great song.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There's a great line in there, something about, interesting people not knowing what they want to do, and knowing 60s or still doesn't know what they
do. Well, I wanted to say one thing about that I went and, I didn't know anyone. There was no one in my family that had been to university. And I was never expected to go to university. It was never even something I considered for a second until later in life. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that surprised me is I thought I was going to go in there and that I'd have a degree, I'd have these letters after my name and I would know all this stuff, Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've had a similar experience, and I don't know if everybody does, but I got a degree and I thought, well, but I don't know anything, I better do a master's. I did a master's, and I mean, all I learned was how much I don't know, how much more there is out there that I don't know. And then by the time I finished the PhD, I knew, that the one big lesson was I know nothing there. There's so much to learn, and there's so much we don't know.
Yeah.
That's the best learning that you get from university, is how much you don't know. And that's the most dangerous people are the ones, the Trump that think they know everything, and they know zilch.
Yeah. It's for me, it was kind of going to university was almost teaching you how to learn, right? It was that critical thinking. It was the looking deeper. It was knowing it was knowing the right questions to ask and all that kind of stuff. Me, like, a little bit sort of coming back to what we were talking about before in terms of changing careers slightly and getting into the sustainability space, like, just constantly learning. It never stops, and I don't think it ever will. And my thirst to try and understand more and more and more just keeps growing. And so I think that's, I don't know, it's something I love about life, is trying to continually learn and continually stuff. And you can do it, through a university. And I think there's definitely pros to that, having access to someone like you, and having the tools and having the resources there. But there's so much stuff online, you know, in this 21st century. And there's so many great books out there to go and read, and there's so many great documentaries and podcasts and stuff to listen. And there's just nothing stopping you learn and expand your mind than yourself, right? I think, and you know, you don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars and get the letters beside your name. You can, yeah, just go and just soak it up. Just go to the library, get books out for free,
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Awesome. There's another question here that so that was a good one. Any thoughts on from Dave Watson? There you going. Any thoughts on foreign-owned water bottling plants being set up in New Zealand?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is another one of my favorite hates. Is the reason that foreign water bottlers come here, and Coca-Cola is a classic. A transnational company that comes to New Zealand, gets water for free, and then puts it in bottles, the best water, not what we hand out to people through our taps and things. This is the very, very best. Deep bores. They're one that got a really deep bore in Pataru. Employs half a dozen people. They put it in plastic bottles, and then they sell it to us at some horrendous price, and they've paid. And the reason that they get it for nothing is government gutlessness. They don't want to take on the thorny issue of water ownership in New Zealand because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's quite clear under Article 2 of the Treaty of Te Tiriti that Māori never gave up sovereignty over fresh water in New Zealand, and so it's government laziness, and it's opportunist overseas companies going in. Here's these mugs. This mug country you can go and help yourself to the water there. It costs you nothing. It costs you, a piece of land that sits on top of the water that you can get for peanuts. You can suck their water out, sell it to them, and the mugs will buy it off you. You know, it's like, it angers me so much. And the cheek of them to do that, and the way that the total failure of government to do that, and the battles. I'm involved with the Māori Council as a expert witness on their claim, on their treaty claim, and it's, I'm just mainly talking about how the Crown has failed its part of the bargain, which was to look after fresh water in New Zealand. You know, that was our part of the deal. That was Crown's part of the deal, and we never, we just completely failed that, and so. We have to sort that out. Somebody has to be brave enough to take that on.
And do you have a bit of a solution there? Do you have a thought of where it could get to?
Well, for a start, we have to figure out who owns it, and then once we deal with that issue, then we can start charging for it, and then they won't want to do it anymore, and then we'll have it back again. Because if they have to pay for it, then they're not going to do it. It's only opportunist kind of thing.
Into irrigating and stuff as well, right?
Although it's completely different. I mean, irrigation water is not that, well, some of it's really high quality, but you're chucking on water that in Canterbury, for example, where there's more water irrigated in Canterbury than all the rest of New Zealand put together. And it's some of it's shallow water that they've already polluted that's being kind of almost reused.
Right.
And so that's a different issue. It's and the issue really with that is the state it goes back in. So it's being sprayed on the land, and then it eventually makes its way back down again. And only it's completely it's got a heap more nitrogen and pesticides and all that kind of stuff in it. So it's about the footprint, the grey water footprint of what we're doing on that land. It's the different side of it. So one's sucking out water and taking it away. The other one's sucking it out, spraying it on the land, and then it's going back in much worse condition than what it came out in. And the other part of that is what's not going back into the land is going out in the milk tanker to be driven to a factory where we dry the water back out of it again with using coal. Coal, so that we can turn it into powder and export it. I mean, so it just gets worse and worse.
That's I guess I'm chuckling away. I think it's just sort of a response. At times you feel like crying, you feel like screaming, and I find myself just sort of laughing at the stupidity of it sometimes. Which kind of is for me is a bit of a segue into a question I wanted to ask you a bit about. Communicating via social media and communicating these kind of things as a whole, like communicating with what we're trying to communicate here, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, is an entire systemic and economic evolution, I call it. We need to evolve the economy to one that becomes circular, one that becomes regenerative and inclusive, and quite simply just works within the laws of the universe, right? Ever change the speed of light or the force of gravity or the way.
Or the laws of thermodynamics.
Exactly. These have been discovered and they've been proven and they are fact, and we have to live within them. That's just as simple as it gets. But we've got an economic system that was invented by a bunch of mostly men who didn't understand that stuff, who wanted to try and be scientists, but they weren't, and they had no idea about carbon cycles, nitrogen cycles, water cycles, and climate change. And we're still following the rules that they set up, decades, I guess, if you go back to the sort of neoliberalist starting, and then hundreds of years, if you go back sort of when capitalism, as far as I understand it anyway. And so we're trying to make this big shift, right? And it's pretty astronomical, and it's taken me a long time to get my head around all that, and I still don't, but that's kind of where I've landed at this point in time. But communicating that to people and getting that across via social media, we touched on it a little bit before around labels and stuff, but it's so difficult, right? Like, and it's such a tricky place to have any decent conversations like this one you and I can have now over an hour or so over this technology, and we can get into some of the deeper stuff. But on social media, it just turns into these just quick little snippets, someone trying to just sort of get one back on someone else's label, and it can quickly spiral into I don't know, just a shitstorm, really. So do you have any kind of approach or strategy behind your kind of communication on social media, or do you just literally see something, post it, and not give it to
so I avoid Twitter totally. I've never been
I can't
I see some of the nasty stuff that goes on there, but like you say, these are big issues and you can't do them with sound bites. But I do really value, and I've got I think 8,000 followers or something on Facebook, so I think it's really important to I just keep banging out those same old stories from a slightly different angle, but I always try to put my own spin on it and highlight the things that I want them to think about. And we do actually have we'll try to, not all the time, but do have some interesting conversations and do learn from other people, what's going on. And there are, of course, there are trolls out there that just want to wreck it. But I also totally recognize that I'm speaking within a bubble of not a COVID bubble, but a bubble of like-minded people. And I think it's still valuable to share that knowledge and to help, people understand it, because I have, I can monitor more places through the universities. I have more accessed papers and that kind of thing. And I do a lot. I don't know if you're on LinkedIn. I get on LinkedIn a lot as well. And I think that's getting to a different audience than the normal one on LinkedIn. There's a lot more business people, I think, on LinkedIn. But not as much on LinkedIn, much more on Facebook. But,
and interesting kind of think across all the different channels as well. Like I've been on Facebook for a while, and I think my friends or whoever still follows me on there probably, but I've reading some of the stuff I post. But I definitely went through a phase of again using plastic because that was kind of my like I say, gateway drug into understanding and awareness. And just posting like, come on, this is ridiculous, and like, come on, we're so much better than this, and look, and there's kind of the shock tactics a little bit, but then kind of I shifted to really trying to use humor as best I could. It doesn't always come across on the social media, but trying to highlight the ridiculousness. And this is something that I don't know if you know, but I was part of this campaign called Bags Not a couple of years ago to get Kiwis to remember how to take a bag shopping. And ultimately the plastic bags got banned, and everyone was like, that's great, but the key was there not the material that was used. It doesn't matter if it was paper that had its impacts, it doesn't matter if it was biodegradable or compostable or whatever, the fact that it was single use. And if people just took their bag with them to go shopping, and that's a behavior change, that's a difference, right? So we tried to set up this campaign to help people remember how to take a bag. So put the bag on the back of your front door, on the handle, put something on your on your rear vision mirror so you remember in the car, put your thing, bags in the back of the car, all these things.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly the reminders I need, because I always seem to go, oh, bugger, I left the
Yeah.
bag behind,
It's hard to learn a new behavior, right?
Yeah.
I
So,
spend my time, like I
totally.
told you, as a fitness trainer, trying to get
Yeah,
people make their lives better and literally
yeah.
stop injuries and make them, live longer.
Mm,
And it was
mm,
hard enough getting them to make changes, let alone get people to remember to take bags. But
mm.
what I wanted to get to was that we sort of started there, and then we shifted the conversation to try and highlight the ridiculousness around plastic bags. And we had pictures of our talent, like carrying, the one was on the Jackie Brown, and she was on the red carpet with a plastic bag, and she was like, she wouldn't take a plastic bag to go to the red carpet. She'd use a reusable handbag or a purse, right? And we had Riley, the shark man.
Yeah.
He was on the beach with a plastic bag with a whole lot of his diving gear in the plastic bag. It's like he doesn't, he has a reusable bag for his diving gear, use a reusable backpack, a reusable bag for everything else. Why is it you think it's okay to go and just turn up to a supermarket with nothing, or any shopping? It's not just supermarkets.
Yeah, true.
Just get given a bag and go back. So we tried to sort of highlight the ridiculousness of it. And I think that humor is a really powerful way. If we can kind of get people to laugh at things and then kind of realize that they're laughing at themselves, I think that's a really powerful approach. And so, I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on that comment and that sort of approach, and if you do anything similar.
No, I don't think I'm very funny, so I haven't I haven't tried that, but I do.
You don't have to be.
No, I know, but I do get it. I've been listening to a really great podcast series on called Crazy Town, which is Post Carbon Institute, and three of the guys there just have a podcast kind of chat and crack corny jokes and things while they're talking. But it just makes it so much more accessible to people. It's not too much serious stuff being thrown at you. So I do get the importance of trying to make a joke and trying to be funny, But I don't know that there's any one way of doing this though, Nick. I think I keep saying to people, in the same way there's not a magic bullet to fix this. There's no magic way to communicate this stuff either. I think it's a whole, everybody does what they're good at. There's a whole mixture of things. I've got there's a doco I've got a paper, an article I've written for Newsroom that'll hopefully be out tomorrow or the next day on, that's another way of communicating this stuff. I write a lot of op-eds. So the Newsroom platform. And on the bottom of that is going to be the link to this documentary that's been a really professionally made documentary with funding from New Zealand On Air and others. And it's going to be online. I don't know exactly where. The link tomorrow will have it, but it's Newsroom, and there's going to be a podcast on Radio New Zealand. And so I'm talking about these issues around freshwater and Canterbury and human health and cancer and all kinds of really important things like that. So, when I think about it's right across the spectrum from, doing this kind of thing, doing the teaching and lecturing stuff that I've been doing, writing op-eds. I'm going to be on a thing with Forest and Bird Youth. Different people have made documentaries and got me. I just think there's just every way possible of trying to get it across.
Is it for you? Is there a sense? I'm sort of picking up a sense that there's just such an urgency. Is that kind of what's driving you a bit? There's just
Well, I guess that's the Better Futures Forum thing, is like seeing this crisis as an opportunity to try and you can see these bloody shovel-ready projects that I think it was before we came on air that we were talking about these things, and there's two sides to this thing. We can see it as an opportunity. We've shown how much we can change. If somebody had told you, like any of us 2-3 months ago, that we could shut down New Zealand pretty much and the roads would be empty, no one would believe you that you could do that. It shows if we have to, we will change, And so I guess that's the kind of that's the opportunity that we have to grab, because if people think, oh, we'll just go back, this is going to be all over next week and we'll just go back to exactly what we were doing before,
Yeah.
then we've got nowhere. It's a wasted opportunity. We have to see this as a symptom of
Yes.
what we're doing wrong.
Yeah.
And if we carry on, it'll be another virus, it'll be another disaster, it'll be even worse. This is our nice little gentle slap round the ear, clip round the ear from the old man saying, get
Yeah.
your shit together, because if you don't, this is going to get really bad. And it could have been a whole lot worse, and it will be a whole lot worse if we don't change.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a great meme or whatever of a little shark being like COVID, and then a bigger shark being economic
Yeah.
turn or whatever. And then
Oh,
the bigger
yes.
shark being
So many things. Climate change,
Yeah.
biodiversity loss, antibiotic resistance, all of these things are coming at us from all directions, and we have to change, and we have to take this as an opportunity to make those
Yeah.
changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone says it's a question there from Natalie. You've kind of
Mm.
answered already, but yeah, do you see any opportunities coming from COVID for shifting national awareness on environmental issues? Is there any kind of specific ones there that you see? Like I see such a need to keep pushing the positive conversations and keep pushing this
Mm.
language and these ideas. So I think if we look at, say, 2008 with the global financial crisis, that these kind of, I guess, these ideas around circularity and around regeneration and around different business models, et cetera, were too maybe too new. They were too much in their infancy, and they weren't well organized, orchestrated, and they had that kind of the 1% protests. I remember in Wall Street there for a while, but that sort of fizzled out. And I think because there was just it wasn't enough kind of organization and stuff around these other ways of doing things. And because let's be honest too, like sustainability and circular economy and stuff has been around for decades. It is not something new. And when you get into it, you read about it and you go back and learn some of those who came before us who are speaking exactly the same sort of language. It's quite humbling to realize how long it's kind of been going on. But yeah, I sort of feel now that there's a lot more proof in these new systems and these new ideas and these new models, and that we're in a much better place to kind of be much more organized and outspoken and really deliberate and with our actions. So is there any specific kind of actions or opportunities that you see in the immediate sort of term or the longer term?
Yeah, I think that we can. I mean, I don't see anything particular coming from it because we didn't see the change. Like in other parts of the world where there's high human populations, like China and or Venice or wherever, and you see these fantastic, they can, and in India, and they could see the mountains they had never seen before, and in California you can see, and in Venice you can see in the water, and they can see because they're highly human impacted systems there. We're mostly cows and not many humans, and so nothing really changed. I mean, there was less cars on the road, less greenhouse gas emissions. There would have been less heavy metals and things washing off our motorways into our waterways. But apart from that, humans are such a small part of the environmental impact in this country that you're not going to see those. So I'm sure people have thought a lot harder about where their food's coming from and things like that as they've been, sort of had to realize, well, we're not, the supermarket market might run out, or whatever's there it's hard to find, and they I heard so many people wanted to plant their own gardens, and a lot of positive will come out in that way. But to me, that's a small part of our problem. We have to figure out how the bigger impacts are at a much bigger scale. Only 1% of our waterways, for example, the length of our waterways are in urban catchments. The other 99% aren't, and about half of them are in pasture catchments where all the cows are. And if you look at number of human equivalents per cow, then you've got an equivalent human population of 140 million New Zealanders if you count the cows. So that's where our big impacts come, and so that's why changing to regenerative farming.
And the hard thing there too, Mike, isn't it, is that I don't know, you'll know the percentages, I'm sure. A huge percentage of that is exported, right, and gone off.
No, totally. Well, most of it is. We can feed ourselves so easily. That's not our issue. As our issue is how, with this, and this is going to be a huge problem because all around the world people are realizing, well, they want to buy local food and they want fresh food, and mean, I was just this lecture I was giving at lunchtime today. That was the figures are for in the States, for every calorie of food delivered into your mouth has 21 calories of fossil fuel energy gone into delivering that one into your mouth, and the growing and transporting and processing and all that kind of stuff. And so that is the issue, because we can't, you can't, there's very few things that are fresh that we're going to be able to get to the other side of the world fresh, you know, without planes and you know, huge footprints. So we've got a bit of a dilemma. We've got an advantage of being isolated, but it's also a bit of a dilemma for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's your comeback, I guess, to that comment that, oh, we've got to feed the world? A good friend of mine, I hope he's listening actually.
Yeah. Well, that's a classic. You know, that makes me laugh, because if you think that, so for example, so well over 90% of the milk goes as milk powder, and it either goes to replace breast milk, and I don't know the exact proportions, but you know, maybe a third goes to replace breast milk through infant formula. The rest goes into this big pile of white powder that ends up as filler in junk food, you know, is pretty much the best way to describe it. It's an additive to a whole lot of things, but mainly highly processed food. So if you think that replacing breast milk and filling up junk food bars and things is feeding the world, then it's not. It's kidding ourselves to try and imply that when it's not, you know. And it's not our fault, but that's where the market lies, because that's the product that we choose to do, because it's got a shelf life once it's turned into milk powder, and you can chuck it on a ship, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't get bought for months or years, because it's got a shelf life. Whereas if you're trying to make high value products, they don't have a shelf life, and they do have a cost to getting them around the world.
Yeah, it's a really good point. One thing for me coming out of COVID, or going through COVID, I guess, is that localization thing. And as I said to start, we had a conversation with Diana Finch, the managing director of the Bristol Pound, around, and it's a local currency in Bristol. And it was really interesting learning a bit more about that. I didn't know a whole lot, and just sort of talking to her about the way of completely. It's not completely. Just a quick point: the Bristol Pound is backed by the English pound. What's the word for their currency?
A sterling.
Sterling. And so it's backed by the sterling, but the idea being that you could step back away from the sterling, or away from the New Zealand dollar, and just trade locally. Like you need to have New Zealand dollar. Like, economies are about trading, and they're about exchanging value, right? And it's all about trust. So when you give me a $10 note, not that many people are using notes these days, but $10 note, I trust that the next person is going to see that is worth the same value, right? So if you build that trust within a community of whatever it is, 50 people, 500 people, 1,000, you know, and they can trade that around, then you can trade and you can live, and it doesn't have to be a New Zealand dollar, and you don't have to pay interest on things, and you don't have to pay loans to other people. You just literally swap and trade, and that's kind of how currencies first started as well, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, when you go back to the economy that was here in New Zealand before Europeans arrived, and it was a circular economy, and it had some kind of trading like that, even if it wasn't a coin or a note. It was that trust and a trade that went from trust.
There's a great story about the. There were sort of two stories. It was about the Irish bankers, but I'll start by talking about the New York waste collectors, and I can't remember. It might have been the 80s, I think. But this happened within a month or two of each other. And in New York, the garbage collectors went on strike. They weren't getting paid well, and they weren't getting well looked after. And the mayor at the time was like, no, we're not paying you anymore. You're just garbage collectors. And after a week, the garbage was all piled up on the streets and still refusing. And a couple of weeks later, it was just absolute, chaos, rats everywhere, rubbish everywhere. And so he gave in and a big pay rise, and they're now pretty well regarded and pretty well paid in New York. So it was a couple of weeks or something before they gave in, I guess, as a local government. Whereas over in Ireland, it was similar time. The bankers went on strike about not getting paid enough. It lasted 6 months. and it just kept on going because the Irish all just created their own little trading system and using pubs. And because the pubs kind of knew all the locals, and they were kind of became the kind of bank really, where people came and give them their IOUs, and they traded through the pubs, and it was just a trust thing. And they just knew, Mike who came every second day and had his Guinness, or Nick who
Yeah.
came, and had his chips and cheese and whatever they had over there, and that's how it worked. And they just managed to run the economy locally through the pubs for 6 months, and the bankers sort of had to go back, so saying, okay, fine, we'll just go back to the work. Fascinating example of um,
Yeah.
the how economies can work, right?
Yeah. Hey Nick, can you see the Zoom chats? Because there's some questions on there.
Yeah, I was just going to get to those. So
Oh, okay.
Jude, Mike, would you advocate monetizing or marketing freshwater access, or making freshwater access cost effective? You kind of
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely would. Yeah, that was part of it. Yeah.
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 How, from Natalia, how can we create momentum for movement towards kaitiakitanga over freshwater when our knowledge is so often silenced in favour of economic interests and colonial capitalists' worldviews are privileged in the academic and public communities and scientific reporting? How can we create momentum?
Yeah, well, I guess it's that kind of again coming from the bottom up and people taking charge of it and making a mandate. But I know we needn't. We've got to. We're not going to have a future while we have the economic system that we have at the moment, and you and I both know that. But if we keep concentrating on growth and GDP, then we are doomed.
Mm.
And we have to start some form of true cost accounting. And the fear for me is that we'll just carry on with this incrementalism where we just fiddle with a completely stuffed system, and you'd be so much better off to chuck it out and start again, with something different. I don't know, I'm not saying that I know what the answer is. I do know that this one's not working, and that anything that's based on growth is not going to work. So yeah, I mean, I don't have the answers. I can always point to what's not working and know what should be doing.
That's the hard thing as well, isn't it? So
Yeah.
people saying things are wrong, but if you don't
Yeah.
turn it, people just sort of what they're supposed to, what the hell am I
Yeah.
supposed to do? And that's
Yeah.
what I try with the answers to talk to the ideas around circular economy, around, I'm sure you've heard of donut economics and Orworth. Big fan of her and on their and the idea of the regenerative economy. There's quite a few, right? Blue economy, but you're putting these alternative ideas out there so people can start to visualize a different way.
I think that's crucial. That's what I was going to say about social media and getting change. To me, the secret is giving people a vision of what it could be like.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to think how to do that. I try to do that with my talks and things, but because I can picture, and I've got a bit of imagination, and I can picture what it's going to look like, and it's just a matter of trying to get that across to people, because it's really easy to say that, if it was some guy on Facebook today, what do you want us to go back to grass huts and ox plows and things like that? Like this is like somehow, polluted, undrinkable groundwater and rivers full of pesticides and nitrates and a biodiversity crisis, and all of this stuff is worthwhile because you get to have skyscrapers and things. Like it's just such a stupid argument, and that's the kind of extremes that you go down, but
yeah, it is. And that's for me a bit of an example. Coming back to that point, it's pretty hard to engage with that person, conversation with them when that's the kind of approach on a social media platform. This question here is about social media. In a world of social media, where it is damn near impossible to separate out opinion from fact, are there any methods, tricks to filter the nonsense? And do you think we should be teaching critical thinking as a skill in schools?
Oh, totally. I mean, the skill thing. I mean, that's totally what I seem to spend my life doing at uni as a lecturer, was reteaching people how to think after they'd been through a schooling system that stopped them from thinking. I think it stopped that. I mean, my example is that I've had some amazing students, and one thing that they mostly have in common is that they were either homeschooled or they'd been brought up on a yacht sailing around the world or something like that, you know, that made them different. There's something about our school system that teaches them to rote learn things, to learn keywords, and then they come to uni and they have to think for themselves. And I mean, you can do courses at uni where rote learning will get you through. You know, being a vet or a doctor is a bit like that. You just have to learn that all these bones are connected and this drug will do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that with lots of other subjects where I don't want you to tell me all the things that I told you. I want you to be able to think for yourself, you know. And so that's the skill that we should be teaching at school. And then, yeah, being able to tease apart what all of the stuff that's being thrown at you on social media and every form of media, being able to figure out who's conning you, you know, who's
what's their motive, right?
Yeah, what's their motive? That's totally what you've got to look for, and then you'll know who to trust and who not to trust. Yeah, Nick, there's another Zoom webinar chat window that there's a bit of stuff happening in that I could answer really quickly.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, well, it's just that someone's asked about the Hawke's Bay water. There's been a report come out recently, really high levels of nitrate in their bores in Hawke's Bay. And I just wanted to say to them that there are really high levels, but they're in shallow bores, and our drinking water tends to come from deep bores. So we've just got I'm on a research group and we've just been looking at a lot of this. So what happens is that individuals on farms and mostly farm workers and things tend to have shallow bores, and they're drinking some really nasty water. But in general, the water supply for towns and things is deeper, and it tends to be cleaner. We just haven't our pollution hasn't reached it yet, you know, like it's still on its way kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but again, this article tomorrow and the doco is on exactly that subject, and colorectal cancer links with nitrate in drinking water. So for Michelle, yeah, just wait for that. And can you see Chloe there?
Yeah, sorry, I had the Q&A box open.
Yeah, but so I don't know if you want to talk.
Yeah, I'll read it out. I'll read it out for you. I'll be the adjudicator or the facilitator. Hi, from Chloe. Hi, Mike and Nick. This goes to both of you, and apologies if it's off track as I joined late. Do you think that open collaboration and knowledge sharing between the private and public sector is creating positive change, particularly towards a transition to a circular economy, e.g. between NGOs, community groups, working with consultancies, businesses, reducing reliance on plastics being a key challenge, needing collaboration, landscape scale restoration, freshwater management, and non-circular example. Cheers. So yeah, in summary, do you think collaboration and knowledge sharing between private and public sector is creating positive change?
Well, I mean, my experience of it's kind of like we have this, and I guess it's a capitalist market thing where I invent something, right, and then I patent it, and then I've locked it up, right? Then that's the end of it. Then no more, you know, it's kind of the end. We make a step forward, possibly, not always, but we've stopped any more development of that thing because we've locked up the IP on it, and then we just want to make money out of it. So to me, that stops us getting ahead. We just do little kind of tiny jumps, and then we get no further because the system's locked us up. But if we all work together on something, and I kind of think of, you know, open source software and things like that, where there's not a profit motive in it, but there's a motive to try and make the world a better place. And if everyone can connect into that, then you can achieve amazing things. But it's hard to do in an economy where we reward people who can come up with some bright idea and then lock it, own it, and sell it, kind of thing. So we stop progress right in its tracks when we do that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, for me, collaboration is so key, and I'm always to our clients that you cannot do it on your own. Now, you know, businesses will want to go on this sort of sustainability journey, and they'll start whatever it is with looking at plastics or looking at their carbon footprint or whatever. They might be able to get so far, but they'll get to a point and they'll just go, shit, we're stuck. We can't do anymore. We need our competitors or industry peers. I try and use their euphemism, or we need you know, government, or we need customers. We need our stakeholders to help us with this. We can't do it on our own, and collaboration is just so important. And again, the environment where we've been brought up in is about competition, and winning. And I have to say too, like being, as I've already said, an avid football player and sports person in my own right, I love that aspect. I love competition, and I don't think it can bring the best out of people, and it can drive and motivate people, but it's just to such a extreme level. And I think politics is another great example, right, where it's people, it's all about winning. It's about winning and getting the vote, and it's not about actually making people's lives better or the world better.
True. But in your football example, aren't you part of a team? You couldn't do it on your own, so you do need that.
True, we collaborate to win, I guess.
Yeah,
which is a good.
But not all sports. I mean, there's individual sports where they don't do that, and it is all about competition.
Yeah, and I guess you're trying to beat the opposition. You're trying to outdo someone else. But I don't know. It's a nice analogy, I guess.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you go.
What I was just thinking about the question about the landscape scale restoration, and I always, want to say, it has to be at that bigger scale to work. You can't, and I get really frustrated when I see, the government, we're going to put this money into restoration, and my analogy, and it's dumb, but it kind of to try and get the point across is, you've got a pot of milk on the stove and it's boiling over. You can go buy some tea towels to put around, put some tea towels around the bottom and keep on buying tea towels to put around the bottom. But how about just turning the gas off? And then, so you can't clean up something while you're still polluting it. So you can't, and it's a bit like the plastic shopping bag thing in a way, is that there's a tiny part of plastic use in New Zealand of those shopping bags. And while I still walk in the supermarket with my other bag and everything I pick up is wrapped in plastic, and we don't have any kind of scheme where, I just want to, and I've never had the guts to do it. And it's the same when I buy electronic things and stuff. I just want to rip the whole lot off and leave it on the counter.
Do it.
And I know I should be braver, but I just feel sorry for the
that's true.
The attendant. It's not their fault,
No.
but then somebody would have to get rid of it. So eventually it would make its way up to the top if we all did that. Yeah.
So I'm conscious of time, Mike, and I won't take up too much more of your time. Maybe if we give it a sort of 8-minute sort of warning, so we finish at 5:30. Because I'm very, very grateful for your time tonight. But I just wanted to tell you a story and sort of hear your response to it. I met with a woman from Fonterra mid last year, and she was telling me about being at a show type thing, and there was one of the big agri-chemical companies was doing this demonstration on how to use a new bit of machinery that had more efficient application of the petrochemicals onto the soil, and she made the point, the farmers were kind of watching it and kind of getting it, and this is a bit naff, and this, we kind of get it, but there was, I think she said about 10 farms, and there was about 20 sales reps there, sort of going, John, you can see that, isn't that great, blah blah blah, and she made the point that those sales people, that they are just human beings trying to go about doing a job, and their incentives are to sell this product, and that's how they feed their family, and that's how they achieve their dreams and their financial freedom and all that kind of stuff. And she sort of made the point, they form bonds, like strong social bonds with these people in the rural community and these farmers, and often the farmers might be not see anyone for a week or two on their farms, and along comes Doug in his in his Ford, whatever it is, every week or two to see him and have a chat, and they actually get to know each other. They're friendly, and their kids go to the same school, and they're kind of stuck in this really hard position where they have to keep buying off him because he's his mate and he wants to keep supporting him, and he's using this product to pollute his soil even further and further. And it just made me sort of realise how challenging that is. It's so easy to sort of say, stop using agrochemicals and blah, blah, blah. But it would have an impact on people, right? And it's a bit like the same with fossil fuel. There's people in the fossil fuel industry, that's all they've ever known, be it mining coal or digging for oil or whatever. So it's just that challenge of bringing those people with it and not excluding people from this new economy. And we would talk about it being inclusive, circular, inclusive and regenerative, about how to bring those individuals along and not just ostracize them and push them out, because they've just found themselves in this job through whatever means, and that's kind of where they're stuck, and to get out of that is no easy feat. So yeah, I just sort of wanted to share that story and hear your kind of thoughts on that, and if you had any
Yeah, I mean, I
really
know that
wise words to that.
there's a lot of, well, and there's a whole lot of really nice people that sell Coca-Cola too, but I mean, and
Yeah.
it's a good job, but I mean, you have to ask yourself, are you happy with the job that you're doing?
Mm.
And there, yeah, fertilizer sales reps, there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of farmers who one day wake up, and I've spoken to a number of them, and go, why did I trust these guys? I remember this old cow farmer in Waikato had 3 big dairy farms, and he got out of it, and he just said, I cannot believe, because he eventually somebody came along and did some measurements on his soil and told him he was over fertilized to hell, and he just said, I can't understand it, but like you say, that it was my mate, and he came round and he sold me this stuff. But when I realized what was going on, he said, I would never in a million years have a rep from the supermarket come around and look through my pantry and tell me what I needed to put in there. But I trusted these guys, but they're on a commission, and of course they're going to try and flog,
Mm.
stuff to me that I kind of like, I don't want to put these people down, but it's their choice to have that job. And that was pointed out in the spin-off article the other day. Alina Siegfried did about the regenerative farmers in the South Island, and they realize, what has happened. You have this kind of, big change point in your life, and you look back on the kind of stuff that you were doing to the land there, and you realize what harm you were doing and how you were taken in by this whole process.
Mm.
And suddenly you see it takes some kind of, re-look at yourself. In the case of the guy that the story was about, it had to be some, and Shane Ward, the regenerative farming guy who's on the BFF, best Better Futures, he talks about this. It's generally the change point is when some crisis happens, where they're going to lose the farm, the bank's going to foreclose, the drought's been so long that you're going to lose everything. That's when you rethink what you're doing.
Yeah.
When things are going good, you just carry on, because
Yeah.
that's all you know, and you're going to keep on doing it.
Yeah.
You're not going to question it.
Yeah. Okay. Last couple of questions here. One about what is the best way to hold councils to account with their water consenting?
Oh God, I've given up trying
Yeah.
to hold councils to
Yeah.
account.
Yeah.
They are such slippery organisations, and they're so driven by invested interests within them and that kind of thing.
We
I
need
don't
to
know. You're just trying to just
get in
keep
there,
at
right?
them.
Join
Yeah,
the
keep
council.
at them, or join the council maybe. But I know some friends who have done that, who are on council, and realize how hard it's the CEOs that run those things, and the top management. It's not the councillors or the mayor.
Right.
It's the those industry. I say industry. All of their mates are in industry. The only thing they understand is growth. The only way they can guarantee themselves a job and more salary is to have more, what you call development, which is more stuff happening in their region. So they don't want to say no to anything.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's a huge, we could spend all night just talking about councils, but
Yeah. Yeah. Oh well, we should. I think, I don't know. My kind of view is we need more good
yeah.
people in
Oh
politics.
yeah, no, for sure.
Local.
Yeah, and I'm not saying no, but it is my mates who are in councils, and it takes so long to
Yeah.
get any change, and you need to have more than just one person. You need to have a team of people,
Yeah.
and like there's I can name them all around New Zealand, and they are making a difference. But
Yeah.
it's not like you get in there and you can expect to change things, because it's a big ship that's going in one direction, and trying to turn it is very hard work.
Yeah, and I think that is there for me. I don't know, but it's something that sort of drives me a little bit. And coming back to that point about privilege, right? I feel so privileged in my life that how can I sit around and just watch, or
Yeah,
just
yeah, for
be on
sure.
Facebook or whatever
Yeah.
social media saying about how bad things are. Like I've got to get
Mm.
in there and use my privilege and
Mm.
my resources to actually try and make things better.
Yeah.
Even though it might be a small little thing, even though it might just be helping my football team stop using tape on their socks. Win.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that sometimes I get frustrated with people not getting out and actually doing the actions, and not sort of putting themselves out, and actually really, volunteering their time, or speaking out, or going along to this council meetings and public meetings, and speaking up. Much easier to stay at home and watch Netflix, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know what this means from Richard Hopkins. What does stasis look like in a sustainable economy sense? Do you know what that means?
Well, I guess he's what he means is like equilibrium. Do you get to
Right.
this kind of, this point where you, and that's what nature's all about, is equilibrium.
Yes.
And yes, that's the goal, is to have equilibrium, and that will have then you're resilient, then you can sort of handle the punches that come, because you'll keep bouncing back to that resilient point. But we have to make some massive changes before we get to that point.
Yes. You make me think. I always just say that to my fitness clients. It's just life's all about balance, right? We're on what they call the Goldilocks planet, because we're the
Yeah,
perfect distance, the size, the amount,
yeah.
the water, liquid water,
Mm,
all about balance. And it's the same. You drink too much water, you
mm,
can die from drinking too much water. But then there's, there's deadly chemicals in your in apple pips, and
mm,
you can die from one glass of red wine, arguably very good for you, whereas maybe a bottle or two not so good for you. It's all
mm.
about
But
balance,
you
right?
but you must have learned from your physiology and stuff about all these feedback loops and things, and how that balance, that stasis, is kept, because these processes can, when pH gets too high, then something else cuts in and knocks it back down again. And that's the kind of things where we've knocked all those out of kilter. That nitrogen that I was talking about, that's causing all the harm in our water. I mean, we created out of fossil fuels now. We now create through industrial processes more nitrogen than the whole world's natural nitrogen cycle in total. We dominate that thing, so that's how much you start messing with really fundamental cycles like that, and the whole thing goes off
It's a bit
kilter.
like diabetes, isn't it,
Mm,
for the soil, giving it
yep.
so much processed sugar going into our bodies, that we've got
Yeah.
children now with early onset, diabetes, type 2 diabetes. It's crazy.
Mm,
Anyway, Mike, last question I wanted to ask you before we go.
mm,
What if there was one decision that you could go back and change in history? Big question.
mm.
But if there was a decision you go back and change in history, I know you can go back as far as you want. What would that decision be? And very
Well,
your own personal decision, but a decision that was like
yeah.
a global level or a local level, or it
Uh,
could be personal.
yeah, no, I think, and I haven't thought about this for a second, but back in the 1920s and 30s, when we discovered that we could make nitrogen fertilizer out of fossil fuels, so we could replace a natural cycle that fixed nitrogen through plants, and we did it. That's what drove. Without that, we would not have this population. I mean, there's a whole bunch of science showing that without artificial nitrogen fertilizer, we would have less than half of the global population that we have at the moment, because that's how many people are fed, extra people are fed. So this green revolution, so-called, which is actually just taking all of that energy stored over the past and making a fertilizer, and so now we eat oil. That's the one thing. If we stop that, we would have half the people on the planet that we have at the moment, and it would be a much more doable thing than what we have now.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, the Green
Mm.
Revolution. They got, I forget his name now. We got a couple of Nobel prizes, didn't they, for doing that?
Oh yeah. Haber-Bosch were the guys.
I,
Haber and Bosch. Yeah.
I am going to wrap this up, but I also think,
Okay.
thanks to the point that the people who did invent that, and the people who did come up with this neoliberalist economic system, I don't know if they were necessarily bad people or thinking
No.
bad things. It just kind of maybe got away on them a bit. And,
No, I don't think they could have imagined what it turned into.
and now it's our time to
Yeah.
evolve it to the next level. But anyway,
Yeah.
Mike, I don't want to
Okay.
take any time. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it, because I know you're a very busy man, and I really value your time. I
No
just want
worries.
to give you the last opportunity. If there's anything you wanted to mention about BFF, or for people to follow that, or follow you, or contact you, is any final words that you wanted to?
Yeah, so if you want some more information, there's waterqualitynz.info. So waterqualitynz, one word, .info is my website with a whole lot of the stuff on freshwater you'll find on there. bff.org.nz is and sign up there, and then you can get all the news from the Better Futures forum and be involved. Hopefully, there's lots of opportunities for you to be part of the change. And that's all I just plead with people, that the only way we're going to change this is we have to do it. No one's going to do it for us. We have to be the change. So yeah.
The change you want to see in the world, right?
Yep.
Good way to finish. Hey, thank you again so much.
Okay.
And I'll be in touch again. Yep. Watching closely. Keep up the fantastic work you do.
Okay, thank you.
Ignore the trolls, and you're hugely appreciated, mate. So
okay.
thank you for all you do.
No worries. Thank you.
See you, mate.
See you later. Bye bye.